What did the Hungarians and Romanians plan to do in the Soviet territories in the event of a victory over the USSR? When developing the Barbarossa plan, the German command proceeded from the idea of a lightning war against the Soviet Union and therefore did not attach much importance to the participation of its allies, Hungary and Romania. These countries had less developed armies, both technically and materially, so they could not play a decisive role in the campaign. However, both Hungary and Romania had ambitious plans for Soviet territories in the event of victory. At the final stage of preparations for the invasion, the Germans nevertheless decided to involve Hungarians and Romanians in active hostilities. Both countries showed great zeal and sought to participate in the war with the USSR. The leaders of Hungary and Romania hoped to earn a place at the negotiating table in the event of the division of the Russian lands, and their societies, fueled by propaganda, actively demanded entry into the war. The Hungarian troops, emboldened by the successes in Yugoslavia, and the Romanian military were impressed by the victories of the German army in Europe. Despite the enthusiasm of the Allies, the Germans were wary and distrustful of them. For example, since January 1941, there had already been a large group of German troops in Romania, which controlled access to local oil fields. This allowed the Germans to keep the situation under control, even in the event of political changes in the country. The official goal of Romanian foreign policy was the return of territories lost in 1940 after joining the USSR. However, over time, the appetites of the Romanian leadership increased significantly, and the plans began to acquire an openly imperial character. The Germans reacted calmly to these claims, as they were focused on their own tasks. In terms of numbers, the Romanian army was the largest among Germany's allies who took part in the attack on the Soviet Union. However, her combat effectiveness left much to be desired. Most of the Romanian soldiers, more than 70%, came from poor peasant strata. These people were distinguished by their endurance and unpretentiousness, but their poor education and inexperience negated these qualities. Any serious setback at the front led to their disorganization and panic. The Romanian officers, like the army as a whole, left much to be desired. Their level of training was extremely low, and the traditions of combat brotherhood and military glory in the Romanian troops practically did not exist. Discipline was maintained with harsh methods, which only aggravated the situation. German military memoirs confirm that the Romanian army was one of the most demoralized. The soldiers hated their commanders, and the officers in turn despised their subordinates, despite the fact that their own skills were in no way superior to the abilities of the rank and file. The weak logistical equipment of the army also added to the problems. The Germans were well aware of the weaknesses of their Romanian allies, but decided to use them anyway from the very beginning of the war, considering the Romanian troops as cannon fodder. Already on June 22, 1941, the Romanian army launched an offensive against the USSR together with the Wehrmacht. Why did the Germans decide to use the Romanian army despite its obvious backwardness? There were several reasons for this. Romanian territory was an ideal frontier for the deployment of German troops in the southern direction. Romania's participation in the war created the illusion of a crusade against Bolshevism, in which the whole of Europe, not just Germany, allegedly participated. Romania's entry forced the Red Army to stretch its forces and weaken its defenses. Romanian lands provided the Axis forces with additional room for maneuver. Romanian units were used to control the occupied territories, fight partisans, and perform lesser tasks. In return for participating in the war, Hitler promised Romania the territories taken from the Soviet Union, Bessarabia, northern Bukovina, and the lands between the Dniester and the southern Bug. After the expulsion of Soviet troops, Romanian administrative units were established in these territories. Bukovina Governorate with its capital in Chernivtsi, Bessarabia Governorate with its capital in Chisinau, and Transnistria, whose capital was first Tiraspol and later Odessa. Antonescu demanded that the officials appointed to manage the occupied territories act as if Romania had established its rule here for 2 million years. The immediate use of all available resources, both natural and human, has become a priority. Forced labor of the local population was actively used on the occupied lands. People were forced to work for the needs of the Romanian army, to repair and build roads. In addition, tens of thousands of young people were taken to Germany for forced labor as migrant workers. The peasants were ordered to hand over all grain to the Romanian authorities, keeping only a minimal supply for survival. Almost all the cattle were requisitioned. The harvest was under police control, and a system of bread distribution cards was introduced in the cities. The local population was actively Romanized in the occupied territories, especially aggressive and senseless in Transnistria, where Russians and Ukrainians predominated, and Moldovans were extremely few. A large number of Romanian language teachers were hastily sent to schools, each of whom was assigned classes. They tried to oust the Russian language from all spheres of life, not only from public administration and business communication, but also from everyday life. A law was passed in Chisinau that completely prohibited conversations in Russian. Slavic names were Romanized. Dmitry was renamed Dumitra, Mikhail, Mihai, Ivan, Ion, and so on. All books in Russian, including pre-revolutionary editions, were withdrawn from libraries. Some of the books were destroyed on the spot, and some were exported to Romania. However, the Romanian leadership's plans to create its own empire never materialized. Over time, the situation changed, and the occupation authorities had to leave the occupied territories in a hurry, fleeing. Hungary's plans to participate in the war against the Soviet Union were less ambitious than Romania's, but it also hoped to expand its territories at the expense of Soviet lands. The Hungarian leadership hoped to get eastern Galicia and, with luck, other western Ukrainian regions. Adolf Hitler did not perceive the Hungarians as reliable allies and for a long time doubted the need for their participation in the Blitzkrieg. However, the Hungarian authorities actively insisted on joining the military campaign. Finally, Berlin agreed, and on June 26, 1941, Hungary declared war on the USSR. The formal reason for this was the incident in Košice, when unknown planes bombed the city. Although there was no evidence, the planes were declared Soviet. As they say, if there was a desire, there would always be a reason. In early July 1941, the Carpathian group of Hungarian troops, which included 2 army corps, was sent to the Eastern Front. One of them consisted of 2 infantry brigades, and the second consisted of 3, including a cavalry unit. Hungarian troops joined the 17th German Army, which operated as part of Army Group South. From the very first days, they were thrown into battle against the 12th Soviet Army. In September 1941, several more Hungarian divisions arrived in the USSR. Their main tasks were the protection of communications and the fight against partisans. It was here that Hungarian soldiers distinguished themselves by brutality, committing numerous atrocities. Their reputation was so black that even the German officers despised the Hungarian punishers for their actions. In 1942, the number of the Hungarian contingent on the Eastern Front reached 200,000 people. On the basis of these troops, the Second Hungarian Army was formed. However, during the Battle of Stalingrad, it suffered a crushing defeat and virtually ceased to exist. The fighting qualities of the Hungarian soldiers turned out to be questionable. Their brutality was manifested against the civilian population, and when faced with an equal or superior enemy, they often retreated, abandoning their positions. For Hungary, participation in the war against the Soviet Union turned into a disaster. The losses were the largest in the country's history. About 350,000 Hungarian soldiers and officers died or went missing on the Eastern Front. Every 10th Hungarian adult male was captured by the Soviets.